Intuition is quiet, it's simple, it's direct, and it's clear. It doesn't need dramatic stories or it doesn't need anything to justify itself. It just is. It is that current of truth that just holds its own. It can be firm and it will be firm, but it won't be frantic. If the conclusion is urgent, it's very black and white and it feels fear-based, it needs more space. When it's black and white, it's not intuition. Intuition is that grounded knowing. It's a clean yes, it's a clean no. It gives you more space in your body, even when the truth is uncomfortable. When we're thinking black and white, it's usually because there's actually a third mystery way that we haven't considered. Intuition leads to self-respect. A trauma response is going to lead to self-abandonment. Hello, my loves. Welcome back. Today we're going to speak about how to tell the difference between your intuition and a trauma response. So another really favorite topic of mine, and something that as you go into your healing journey, you're going to want to know more about. So today we're going to cover what your intuition is, what a trauma response is, the biggest misconceptions around the signals of your body, how intuition feels in the body, how the trauma response feels in the body, give you some more clarity or framework around how to discern between the two, what actually makes trauma and intuition overlap, how to build cleaner self-trust around trusting your intuition, what our clear yes and no mean and what they feel like versus what a survival or charged no or yes mean and feel like, and what is a natural growth edge that our intuition is leaning into and saying yes versus this is actually a danger signal. So when we're holding trauma or unhealed parts of us, this becomes confused. And so let's clean it up today and give you so much more clarity around how to work with this. And there we've got little Augie in the background having a little nap. So the main question we're going to be asking today and answering today is this my intuition? Or am I overreacting, or am I activated? And sorting out some of that confusion you feel around, should I move in this direction? Is this aligned for me, or should I not? And is this going to take me down a dangerous or painful path? So let's talk about what the confusion kind of looks like. So imagine that you're about to make a big decision and your body contracts around it. Is that because you shouldn't be making that decision and something bad is going to happen? Or is it because you are afraid and you are stepping into something that is expansive? How do you tell the difference and how do you work with that? Or you're offered an opportunity and suddenly you want to back out. And do you trust that feeling or do you not trust that feeling? Maybe you're about to be more visible in the world and your system says, no, don't do that. How do you navigate that? Maybe you've met somebody new and your body is reacting in a certain way and you're like, is this my knowing? Or is this a pattern and should I lean in more? Or maybe you are in a familiar pattern in a current relationship and you're like, is this make or break? How do I navigate this? My intuition is telling me one thing, but it feels unclear. And how do I get clarity around that? And a lot of this comes down to just like not having enough nuance, not having enough consciousness in the body, in that we can just kind of take on generic things. And the less self-awareness that we have, or the less consciousness we actually have, the more we're just going to take on blanket statements like trust your body or trust your gut, and not actually have, I guess, more depth of understanding around what they actually mean. So you can assume a sensation means this is wrong, or it's unsafe, or I need to stop, or I need to leave, or I need to fix this in some way, or I need certainty before I can move in a particular direction. But then there's another part of you that is saying, am I sensing something that is off? Am I sensing, like, what is it that I'm sensing here? Am I reacting from old pain, or is this a deep knowing and a deep truth? And so when you've been taught to mistrust your body, which everybody has, and it's obviously a big conversation for women because there's a lack of understanding around a woman's body, her cycles, and all of that. And a lot of the studies that we have and a lot of the investigation that has been done in mainstream spaces, which are not the spaces that we're looking for depth of consciousness and depth of awareness, but it matters in that there's not a lot of wisdom around a woman's body. So often you feel disconnected, you feel dissociated, you feel crazy, or you feel like you can't trust your body. And so this is what I'm here to help you with, so that we're starting to change that narrative, and so that you become a woman that has that deep sense of trust around your body. And it's not just like, oh, trust your body, but then you're ending up in situations that you're thinking, oh, this is a pattern. How did I get here? Or you're not creating what it is that you truly want from your life. And you're wondering what inside of you you're potentially not interpreting correctly, or what you still need to learn and what you still need to understand. So you need to know that not every body contraction is a no. Sometimes it's just that protection mechanism and you're meeting something unfamiliar. And as you get practice, as you put yourself in new situations and, put yourself out there and try different things, you'll start to learn what that no truly feels like versus, oh no, this is something that I can lean into even though there is resistance and fear. But today will give you heaps more clarity on that. So I just want to dismantle shame around having strong bodily responses, especially as a woman, because if you're taught to trust your body, your instincts, your intuition, your cycles, all of that stuff, then your body is going to be screaming at you in some way, but you're not going to know how to interpret that information. So it can feel very overwhelming. It can flood you. It can feel really destabilizing. And it can feel really, really confusing. And you're definitely not broken because your system is reacting. But usually when it's gotten to the point where it's like overwhelming you and flooding you, there were little subtler cues along the way that were saying, this doesn't feel right, or I don't feel safe. And by the time you've kind of gotten to overwhelm, it's glaringly obvious. But let's try, and what we're always trying to do here is get you to see the things that happened along the way so you're not continually getting flooded and destabilized, and you're actually able to meet yourself a lot earlier and stay a lot more grounded and stay so much more deeply connected to yourself. So this episode won't be about gaslighting yourself out of what you're feeling or denying what you're feeling. It's about becoming more precise with how you determine and interpret what it is that you are feeling. So let's talk about what intuition is versus a trauma response. So intuition isn't panic. It's not a false perception, a panic, a fear response dressed up as wisdom. That is a protection mechanism where we dress up what we think is a knowing, but we make it egoic. We make it like I'm better than other people because I see this or I know this. But there's actually a lot of fear, a lot of separation, and a lot of projection involved in that process. So intuition is always going to create boundaries, but it's always going to do it with clarity, with calmness, with love. Your intuition is never going to be the thing that labels something else as wrong or bad as an overall thing. It's going to label it as wrong or bad for you, but it's always going to leave energy for spaciousness, for more understanding. So intuition is quiet, it's simple, and it's direct, and it's clear. It doesn't need dramatic stories or, it doesn't need anything to justify itself. It just is. It is that current of truth that just holds its own. So it might say pause, because intuition is spacious and it requires space. It might say this isn't aligned, or it doesn't feel aligned. It may say, I need more information. It may say wait. It may say no. It may say yes, even though I feel scared or nervous. It may say this is the right next step, even if I'm just going to get information and it doesn't feel like this is the full thing. This is the next step that I need to take in this journey. It can be firm, and it will be firm, but it won't be frantic. And the biggest key about intuition versus anything else is that it remains as a consistent current over time, even after you've gone through dysregulation or emotions, and you've come back to regulation. It's a consistent current that is there. So sometimes you'll feel more of it when you're more regulated. Other times you'll feel less connected to it, especially if you're disconnected. So the more regulated you are, the more regulation and connection to resource you cultivate within yourself, the stronger your intuition is, because it's part of that grounded, anchored current of truth that moves through you. So intuition isn't going to argue with you or negotiate. You can negotiate with it and try and do something else, but it's not going to change. It's not going to change its initial position. It's going to gather new information and expand upon that. But the initial position of what step you needed to take, whether it was a pause, a no, a yes, move forward, that's not going to change. It's just going to expand, or you're going to get more information. So it's just going to keep repeating the same truth. Whether you decide to listen or not, it's not going to falter from that. So there's a simplicity to your intuition. And you can imagine if you're living frantic, busy, overwhelmed, in survival existence or season of your life, and there's not a lot of simplicity, there's not a lot of slowing down, turning inwards, connecting, listening, pausing, then the intuition is going to be difficult for you to connect to or cultivate. And perhaps that's because you're trying to distract yourself from the truth of what that might reveal to you about the choices you're making, the relationships you're in, the career you've chosen. So again, it's not going to lie. And so your willingness to sit and listen means that parts of your life are likely going to come up for review and maybe change or dismantling or rearranging in some way. So your intuition isn't going to build a long case of justification. It doesn't need to obsessively gather evidence. It doesn't need to rehearse every possible outcome. It's a knowing. And that's why the people that are the most connected to their intuition is just like, I can make this decision, and it just is. I don't have all of the information, but I know this is my next step. And this is the thing about walking an aligned path that I've learned, is that when we're trying to do something that is somebody else's path and it's not ours, it's society's, or somebody told us to do it this way, it's not for us parts of it might be, but the path and the steps that we're meant to take isn't for us. When we're trying to do something that it isn't ours, we want the clarity of the steps. We want to say, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get the outcome. I'm going to go to school, and then university, and then I'm going to get the secure job, and I'm going to get married and get the house and have the children, and my life is going to be planned out. Or I'm going to take this course on business growth and marketing, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to post this on social media, and I'm going to do this on my website. I'm going to sell this program or offer or product, and it's all going to work out. That's when you know that you are disconnected from your intuition, because your intuition is a thing that goes, I don't know what the step is after this and this and this and this, but I know that I'm just going to take this step forward. That is when you are on your own path. You're just going to keep taking one step at a time, and it's internally guided. Of course, you're going to have input from people who have been somewhere that you haven't been. And, it's not this solo, isolated journey at all. It's connected to the web of creation. You go, oh, yep, what they're saying that, feels like it's going to input and help me move forward. And so that's, I'm going to move in this direction. But you don't have the map. The map doesn't exist. The map is just something you are building as you go. And the thing about that is people want certainty. We want to know the outcome. We want to know that this step leads to this, because what if it doesn't? Who am I if it doesn't? And so intuition is the dissolving of the ego. Like, what if I step in this direction and my life unfolds in this completely different way to what I'm trying, to create for myself? Well, you're not trying to create to fit in. You're not trying to create to fit a mold. What you're trying to do and what you need to be doing is nurturing this thing inside of you that's going to create, if you follow it, the most alignment, the most ease, the most connection, the most love. And the most ease because you're so connected to truth. So there's not performing, there's not hiding, there's not shame. It just is. But from experience, you have to be willing to go slow. It's going to take longer than your sense of urgency, which we're going to go into soon. And it's just there's certain things that come with leading from intuition and your inner knowing. Because that inside, that part of you just knows. So a trauma response, though, is a protective reaction. And so your intuition and your trauma can coexist. And we're going to talk about that today too. But a trauma response, it's not random, it's not stupid. It's your body protecting you from things that it knows, because it's recognizing a pattern. Yeah. It's pattern recognition and saying, this has hurt me before, and so I'm going to protect you from it now. And that's not to say if you move from intuition that things aren't going to hurt you, that there's not going to be hurt or pain. That's not how life is. Of course, there's going to be. But when it's a trauma response saying, I'm trying to protect you from the pain, it's like, I don't have enough capacity to deal with the hurt and pain that might come from moving in that direction. So there's this nuance and overlap of that may be where I need to move, but the pace at which I need to do it is going to look completely different. We'll talk about that more a little bit later. So a trauma response carries urgency, it carries intensity, and it carries a need to act immediately. That is different from the universe loves us to move quickly in terms of it loves decisiveness. But that's from intuition of like, I know, I move, I act. Not from fear of loss. That's very different. It's moving from a knowing of like, This is it. I move. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm being told that this is what I do. And I just go bang, 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 and I execute. Very different from like urgency and scrambling. If I don't do this, something really bad's going to happen. Right? So there's a composure, there's a groundedness to moving from your intuition. And if you're still very much in the survival patterns and inside of the trauma responses, and you haven't cultivated a lot of connection to that yet, it's okay if you find yourself moving from urgency. It's okay if that is a big part of your existence and the scarcity and the fear is driving a lot of your actions. But what we want to be doing is the more that we can, as much as possible, is learning to be guided by this grounded, clear, direct knowing. And so trauma can feel like a real urgency of like, I need to fix this now. You can imagine what that's like if it comes up in relationship. I need to know something now. All of that meaning making that we do and can do when the nervous system is dysregulated or we're in a survival response or a insecure attachment pattern. Or I just need to exit now, really kind of panicky and overwhelmed. Or I need them to understand me right now, this urgency around I have to be understood. Or I need to prove myself now. Or I need to make sure that I am safe. I have to make sure that I am safe before I can continue this urgency, this grasping, this scarcity. So that trauma response usually comes with a full body charge. And where I define trauma is that it's outside of your capacity to stay connected to your knowing, your sense of resource, your sense of intuition. You're not just stretching your capacity and feeling like, okay, this is stretching me. I'm scared. It's a scary element to it, but there's a knowing about that I'm connected to that is helping guide me. We've lost that connection and you're just in full body urgency. So the process is to build as much of that resource, as much of that groundedness as possible through small daily interactions. The first thing that I do with any of my clients and give you a framework to do that. So examples of trauma responses are like fight responses, being confronting, very defensive, over-explaining, needing to really prove your point, a big flight response. So leaving, quitting, cancelling, running away from the discomfort. A freeze response, so just going numb, going blank, feeling stuck, feeling unable to choose, so very confused, but kind of like numb or just blank in your body. A fawning response, so pleasing, agreeing, overperforming, becoming who other people need you to be. And then there's the collapse of shame and hopelessness, or like, I can't do this, or I'm not capable, and what's wrong with me, and all of that. So it's important to know that anything that is a big, big challenge for us, that is way outside of our comfort zone, can potentially send us into any of those responses just as a normal person. Anything that is too much for us to digest, that triggers our wounding, can send us into that response. So things that I do in my life that I'm regulated inside of could be very traumatic and too activating for other people. Similarly, things that people are doing that I'm not, speaking on big stages, having a lot more visibility, are things that would potentially send me into those responses. So trauma responses and our nervous system is all about what is digestible to us. What is something that we can regulate to, something we can digest and integrate, and something that we still can continue to hold that connection to resource and inner knowing despite the challenges and the sensory input and the things that are activating, our old wounding. Because that wounding, it can be activated at any time. But the more capacity we build, the more we challenge ourselves, the more that we lean in towards what we want to create and become more of our true selves, the less those wounds go into those big trauma responses. So the less that we dysregulate, because we're exposing ourselves to really big things. And this is why I am, for better or for worse, a big supporter of women using social media to their advantage, using visibility to their advantage. Whether we love social media or hate it, it doesn't matter. The fact that you are exposing yourself to such a massive amount of stimuli in terms of like who can see you, who can comment, what they can say, how you present yourself. It's just such an incredible tool for your healing. And, especially if you want to create your own income or business or something like that, it's an incredible tool. And people will obviously, it's going to take you a while to be the person that is visible to a large amount of people online as your authentic self, that matches the authentic self that maybe you are day to day. I'm still working on that because the person that I feel safe being around, the people that I know, and where I can stay connected to myself versus on the internet. Of course, people become weird online. Of course, people, put on a mask or feel uncomfortable, whatever that is, start to go into these, going blank, feeling stuck, feeling unsafe, over explaining, becoming somebody that you think you need to be, the people pleasing, all of that, because the threat is larger. The exposure is larger. The visibility is larger. And so it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's a big ask for a nervous system, especially when you're healing from feeling unsafe, being seen, and you're healing these things and learning how to regulate. So, all of these things are possible, whatever pathway or avenue you use, whether it's visibility in a broader sense or in your intimate relationships. But of course, anything that's a bigger threat can send us into these situations. But the more we're leaning into exposing ourselves and being seen while staying connected to that inner knowing, the easier it gets and the less that those wounds get triggered, because, there's a certain level of exposure that if we expose ourselves at that level enough times that we're comfortable, you're going to be in a really, really good place. Anyway, little tangent. So let's talk about the misconception of like the body never lies. So this is really important because, you've gone from like mistrust of the body and a system, potentially, this is what I'm imagining is a bit of your story potentially, is you've gone from a system, an unconscious system, where there was a lot of mistrust of the body. And then you've come into more somatic work or women's spaces, and it's all about the wisdom of the body and trusting the body and honoring the body. But there's still a whole path that you need to walk in terms of interpreting those bodily cues. So some of those cues, like you should always trust the body, but the way you're interpreting it can be incorrect, cannot be the full story. And so this is what I see a lot. It's like, people, women come into women's spaces and start to learn all of this stuff. And then it's all about, protecting almost these trauma responses. So they feel like they haven't been understood. And now they've swung to the complete other end of the spectrum. And it's somewhere in the middle. It's somewhere in the middle of like no, that's not necessarily what that information means. Because especially when it's at a dysregulated state, that you need to, regulate yourself and bring yourself back to center before you can clearly interpret. So your body doesn't lie is absolutely true, but your interpretation of truth can absolutely be off, and usually is for majority of people. So there's a lot of nuance that we need in that whole your body doesn't lie. So your body is telling you the information, but by the time you're actually listening to it, it's usually frantic. It's usually in a trauma response, or it's usually scarce or panicked. Listening to it and learning to create the capacity to listen to it at an earlier stage, when you're calm and grounded, then yes, we're understanding the body it's never lying to us. It's telling us everything, but our perception and our interpretation is up for question. So your body is going to tell you what does feel safe and what doesn't feel safe based on your history, based on how much you were taught to listen at those earlier stages. So if your family of origin interpreted once things were already escalated and missed all of the bodily cues about the needs that needed to be met for emotional connection and nourishment and co-regulation early on, then the need you're trying to meet is not actually meeting the initial need. You're just meeting it at a crisis point over and over and over again. So you want to think of it more like your body is giving you data, and all data needs to be interpreted. All data needs interpretation. So your body is always communicating. It's always giving you information, and it's not lying to you. But that doesn't mean that your interpretation of it is accurate. So if being seen and being visible to you led to criticism, then visibility is not going to feel safe. And that's going to be true for everybody to some degree. If you stood out as a unique person, there's always going to be somebody that criticizes you. Always. We do it, to people that we don't agree with, but they have a big platform. We think, how did they get that big platform? Their knowledge or their information on what they're sharing is off, it's incorrect, or it's really not okay. We're going to criticize them, whether internally or externally. We're criticizing the information, not the visibility necessarily part of it. But the thing is, you get visibility, you're going to get critique. Some of it's going to be accurate and something we need to listen to, and some of it's just going to be noise. A lot of it's probably just going to be noise, but you're going to get visibility. Just means that. It's the same if we go and watch a show. We watch a show or a movie that's just come out, we go and watch it. You're putting something out there for criticism. So that's just going to exist. It's just whether that has become something that caused you to shut down and say, oh, I'm not okay because I'm being criticized, or you're just like, that's part and parcel of the whole process. And how much you're going to let those criticisms impact you, or how much you're even going to engage or look at them. Similarly, if rest was shameful or you just didn't see it, then slowing down could feel wrong to you, and you could make that interpretation of like, oh, I'm not allowed to rest. If success created pressure or disconnection from the things that mattered, then expansion or success is going to feel threatening. If your boundaries led to disconnection, loss of connection, rejection, then saying no is going to feel dangerous. And so all of these examples are things that absolutely can be true in reality. I would say all of those things are going to be true. So your boundaries are going to lead to disconnection. They're going to lead to loss of certain relationships. Success in some ways is going to obviously lead to pressure and maybe disconnection from certain things. Hopefully not from your needs. We're not doing that. But, that you might rest and it might be shamed by some people that don't know how to rest. So all of these things can be things that are happening, but it's how much weight you're giving to that information. This is what I mean about interpreting your body's cues, because you're then seeing the critique around visibility or the shame around rest or the rejection or testing of your boundaries as a threat response as your body reacts. But that doesn't mean the same thing as, oh, I need to stop resting, or I need to stop setting boundaries, or I need to stop being visible, or my message doesn't matter. This is what I mean about the responses in the body being something that we need to interpret and listen to, rather than just making these black and white assumptions and being aware of what those connections are and those subconscious stories are that we are telling ourselves. So the body sensation is very real, but the conclusion we're making about it may not be. And if the conclusion is urgent, it's very black and white, and it feels fear-based, it needs more space. So let's give an example. If you have a tight chest, around an opportunity, something comes up and your chest tightens. So an old conclusion may be, this opportunity is wrong, not aligned, don't want to do it. A more precise interpretation, if you can create enough space for your intuition to be present, is, okay, visibility feels threatening. And it feels threatening to some part of me. And the more mature next step might be, I need to regulate myself before I decide what this means. If you can't, and having that level of visibility is going to send you into a trauma response, it's not for you yet. There will be another opportunity. If you keep taking yourself into these threat responses to prove something out of urgency because you think there'll never be another opportunity, and you never stay connected to yourself and you never integrate that experience, then we're in trouble. That is living outside of your capacity, right? And when you're outside of your capacity, you lose connection to your intuition, your inner guidance. And whilst you're making those decisions, you're going to be taken advantage of. Things that, are unsafe might happen. You might be in people-pleasing mode, fawning mode, and some negative or harmful things can happen. So we need you in your body with your discernment, with your connection to your knowing. So your body might be telling you the truth about your history, about what happened, but it's not necessarily telling you the truth about the present moment. So now let's talk about how intuition feels in the body. So this is a really helpful section that you can come back to. We'll make some notes. So intuition is that grounded knowing. It's a clean yes. It's a clean no. It's not loud. It's quiet. It's not defensive. It's a steady sense that something is a fit or it doesn't fit. It gives you more space in your body, even when the truth is uncomfortable. So if you follow it, you say the thing, you have the uncomfortable conversation, you always feel more spacious on the other side. It's basically the whole thing. It's basically all you have to know. If what you've said takes you into more urgency, pause, question, think about your decision. If it's going to give you more space, even if you've lost an opportunity, you've had to let go of something, you've had to say no to something, but on the other side, you're like, okay, I have more spaciousness, I'm more connected to myself. Beautiful. Even if you're uncomfortable, even if you're like, did I just lose something that could have potentially been really good? Doesn't matter if it gives you more spaciousness, we're on the right path. So the intuition isn't going to have that compulsion to convince somebody. It's not going to have that, compulsion to be validated. You might have that overlapping the decision-making process, but I'm talking about the intuition that is that guiding force underneath all of that. If you follow that enough, the need for validation, the need to justify the need for urgency will get integrated by that process. Follow that and just let all of those other urgency things get integrated by the spaciousness that you keep creating through following your intuition. That your intuition is also going to have the ability to pause. Always. To gather more information. It's going to always give you the ability to ask more direct questions. It's going to have the ability to honor yourself without drama, without chaos. And it's like we said before, it's going to give you the ability to move without having total clarity or certainty. It's just a knowing. So intuition can absolutely be uncomfortable to follow. People think, when I'm guided by my intuition, I'm not making uncomfortable decisions. Oops. So intuition can absolutely and will absolutely be uncomfortable to follow. People have a fantasy idea of thinking, when I'm guided by my intuition, it's just going to be lovely and nice. And yeah, it becomes a lot better and a lot easier and a lot clearer, but you're still making uncomfortable decisions. It doesn't make you abandon yourself, which is the ease of self that you cultivate, but you're still having to have uncomfortable conversations. You are still having to say no. You are still having to confront your fear around boundaries. You are still having to look at the coping mechanisms of people pleasing, of defensiveness, and all of that are at odds with this deeper understanding. So, examples of your intuitive knowing could be this opportunity looks really good, but it's not aligned for the season that I'm in. Could be I'm scared, but I know that I'm meant to take this next step. It could be this person's advice is really well-meaning, but it doesn't land. Maybe there's a little bit that I can take from it. When we're disconnected from our intuition, as I make that point about advice, when we're disconnected from our intuition, we feel defensive over receiving advice or unable to receive the well intentions of people. I see this a lot. People being really critical about what people say during a difficult season of grief, or what people say and what the advice that they give of don't say these things or do say these things. And when you don't have your own internal knowing, and a lot of your existence is built in fawning, people pleasing, these survival mechanisms, you can't receive, maybe there is a chunk of goodness or just the intention, even if the delivery is off. Being able to receive it and filter out what's not for you is the best position that you can be in. Because again, the boundary isn't about shutting people out. It's about being able to receive them and knowing where the connection works and flows, and then what doesn't work and what we're filtering out of their stuff. And so without that, as you can imagine, there's not a lot of success of relationship. So again, you can understand that a person's advice is well-meaning, but it doesn't fit right, or, a lot of it doesn't fit right for me right now. Also, I need to slow down before I commit is a very intuitive answer. How I run my spaces, how I run my intake process. I've done so much study and sitting with people around sales and marketing, and so majority of what is out there is obviously like trying to make a sale from us, trying to get our money, trying to lock us in, rather than actually allowing the space for that true alignment. And that requires space. It requires somebody to feel that they are stepping into a process at the right time, even when it feels scary. Seen way too many people out there selling and sharing about sales and marketing that are just inside of those trauma responses, inside of that urgency. And that's okay if you're in that season and you need to make money. It is what it is. But just be aware of how the vast majority of society operates. So, needing to slow down before you decide something, needing to slow down before you commit to something is a natural and normal process. Again, digestible chunks. You need time to integrate. You need time to get more information. Intuition will also say, I don't need to explain myself to everybody. I know what I need. I'm just going to meet those needs. If people need you to justify it a lot, question that relationship. And are those people supportive of you meeting your needs? Your intuition is also going to say, this environment doesn't support who I'm becoming. Or this is uncomfortable because it's new, not because it's wrong or misaligned. Or saying yes. This is a big one. This is a really good one for how I define my boundary. Is saying yes going to cost far too much of me? That's how I know there's a self-abandonment line that I could potentially be crossing. And if my yes is going to cost me too much of myself, then it's a no. So intuition is going to often allow you to stay in that grounded adult choice. It's going to allow you to stay in grounded adult relationships because the relationships you'll be in are going to support you to say, I don't know, I'm going to pause, I need more time, I'm not available for that, but what about this? I need to think about it. It doesn't feel aligned. I'm willing to try. I'm scared, but I'm still choosing this. I can move slowly, but still move. So intuition is not comfortable all of the time. The decisions that we're going to have to make on our path are going to make us confront the people pleaser, the fawning response, the part of us that wants to hide. So it's not going to be comfortable. It's going to ask us to grow, but it's always going to be there. We're always going to stay connected to ourselves in that process. So that this part, is important because so many people mistake fear for a no. And then they spend their whole life just trying to stay safe and let fear, outrun them. So let's talk about the contrast of what a trauma response feels like in the body. We've spoken about it a bit, but it feels like urgency, obsession, spiraling, scanning, and needing to know immediately and needing to control the outcome and needing to be understood straight away and need to feel like there's a final decision that is made while still activated. There's a collapse into shame, a strong inner story that sounds absolute. When it's black and white, it's not intuition. Intuition is more like, this is what we need to do. But there's a spaciousness of like, I'll just be here when you actually, I'll just be here. This isn't changing. Whereas a trauma response can feel like it's erratic, like confused. I don't know if it's this or is it this, but I need some sort of control over the moment. Ground yourself, regulate yourself, resource yourself. That's how you're going to come back to intuition. So a comment in a dialogue when you're inside the trauma response is like, I can't trust anybody. I knew this would happen. I'm going to fail. I'm not safe. I need to get out, or I need to make them understand I can't handle this. This is what always happens to me. I'm too much. I'm not enough. If I don't fix this now, everything's going to go to shit. I've lost everything. So a trauma response is going to turn a present moment into a past wound. Whereas intuition is going to turn the present moment into possibility and opportunity for growth, more clarity, more ease, more expansion, more connection. So, an example, someone gives you feedback on something that you've done. And a trauma response would say, I'm useless, I failed, I need to defend myself, justify myself, or I should quit before I'm exposed too much. And of course, it's okay if you have that stuff come up in the background because it's a scary situation and you're at your edge. But your intuition is going to say, okay, some of this feedback is valid and useful. Some I don't really resonate with. Maybe I will later down the track, or maybe just not at all. And I can really take what's true without collapsing into shame. Another example might be visibility. In the present moment, you're about to post something on social media or speak or share or lead or be seen in some way. And a trauma response will say, people are going to judge me. I'm not ready. Who do I think I am? I need to make it all perfect first. And intuition is just going to say, this feels edgy because I'm being seen. But I can move at a pace that supports my nervous system without collapsing into hiding. And, a really good example is as I've gone through more visibility and, speaking to camera and building my brand, all of these things, like I used to be very urgent around having to get the message out. My breath would be constricted, my voice sounded different, and was all about feeling like there was scarcity around my voice being heard or, getting the information out. And as, I practice, as I get more comfortable with visibility, using my voice, being seen, comfortable with criticism, it's just that much more ease and relaxation of just, putting things out there and just letting them be received how they're received by whoever is receiving them. So there's a discernment framework that I want to give you briefly. And that's a 5 kind of question check that you can ask yourself in any moment. And it's about discerning what your body is telling you and how to interpret that in a way that's going to support you to make better decisions. So number 1 is going to be, is this feeling urgent or is it steady? Urgency is going to mean activation. Steadiness is going to mean intuition. Look, there can be some nuance in that, but it's a pretty solid way to make that connection. So if the feeling says I have to act right now or I'm unsafe, unless you're in an actually threatening situation, this is the nuance. If you are in a survival situation where you actually feel like there is a threat to you, then there's urgency. And there's a big nuance here. And this is the thing, because say you're on a date with a man and you're like, this doesn't feel aligned, but you don't know him from a bar of soap. So there's a sense of urgency around the boundary or whatever it is because it feels like a threat response because it's a man. You don't know him. He could be a threat. So when there's a sense of urgency around it, just understand the context that you're talking about too. What we're hoping to get is that knowing, that connections to stability that helps you make that decision without having to project all of that fear because it may not be warranted. So I would say that you want to understand that, life is, you are putting yourself in potentially threatening situations. But can you continue to cultivate that ability to pause and find groundedness? So it doesn't mean if the urgency is saying act right now, you're unsafe. It doesn't mean the concern is necessarily wrong, but it means that your nervous system is very charged to be the only voice that you're listening to. So that is very, very important to know. Let me repeat it. If the feeling is saying act now or you're unsafe, pause for a second unless you're in a genuinely threatening situation, because it doesn't mean the concern about being unsafe is wrong, but it just means your nervous system is charged and it's too charged to be the only voice that you're listening to. So start to just get clear around how valid that is in the situation or not. So examples might be, like we said, a date where you're like, hey, this isn't working out, but you don't know the person from the bar of soap. You don't know if he's going to react well or not based on your past experiences. So just see if you can, remain grounded enough through the process of that interaction and getting to that point of the date that you're not out of your body and you still have that connection to your discernment. So maybe you've asked questions previously. You've made sure you feel safe. You made sure you feel supported. You haven't given out too much information so that if somebody does react poorly, you've either filtered them out way earlier on, or you are in a situation where you feel like you're not in a threatening position and so you're able to have that other connection to that other voice in the moment. So examples of urgency would be quitting something while you're still activated, sending a long message while you're still emotional, saying yes because you're scared to reject somebody, you're scared of their response, you're scared to disappoint them, saying no because being seen feels threatening, canceling because your system is overwhelmed. But a steadier response might be, I just need a moment. I'll think about it. I'll sleep on it. I'll revisit it tomorrow. I'm going to go regulate, move my body before I decide. And I can take one step without deciding the whole future of the situation. Because the step you take is going to create a whole different energetic pathway that then is going to allow for more information or a different response from the people around you that might change the outcome. Right? When we're thinking black and white, it's usually because there's actually a third mystery way that we haven't considered. Second question, does this feeling soften after regulation? So if it's urgent and you regulate yourself, it's going to soften. So if you breathe, you go for a walk, you shake, you dance, you put on some music, you take a shower, you splash your face, you do a workout, you get away from whatever the trigger is, you stop building the same story in the same case, you sleep on it, you come back to the question when the body has more capacity. Then ask, is the knowing still there? Is it clearer? Has the story changed? Is the urgency reduced? Do I still feel a no? Do I still feel a yes? If it disappears after regulation, it may have been activation. If it becomes clearer after integration and regulation, then it might just be your intuition. Number 3 is this based on present evidence or old evidence? So look at the truth of the moment. What is actually happening? What is actually being said? What is actually being done? What are the facts versus this feels like this. This is because men are like this, or this is because when I'm visible, this happens. This reminds me of being criticized. This reminds me of when I was younger. This feels like rejection. This feels like the last time I trusted myself and got hurt. Number 4, does this feeling lead me back to myself or away from myself? This is important. Intuition leads to self-respect. A trauma response is going to lead to self-abandonment. It's going to cost you far too much if you move in that direction. So am I about to abandon my boundary? Am I about to abandon my dignity? Am I about to abandon my values, my pace, my truth? Am I about to create conflict to feel more in control? Am I about to make myself smaller to feel safe or chosen? So a trauma response might say yes so they don't get upset. Say no so you don't have to feel exposed. Quit so you don't risk failing. Intuition will say be honest, slow down, ask for support, take the next step. You don't have to worry about the whole thing, just do the next piece. You don't have to prove anything. Their emotions aren't your responsibility. Number 5, last one, would I make the same decision if I felt safe? Would I send this message if I was regulated? Would I quit if I felt supported? Would I still believe this about myself if I felt safe? Would I still choose this if I wasn't avoiding discomfort? So would I still cancel if I felt safe being seen? Would I still stay quiet if I felt safe being honest? All of these questions. So that sense of safety gives you access to your intuition, into your truth. What people are talking about when they say safety is more intuition, more resource, more regulation, more connection to truth. So this is very, very quickly before we close, and I might miss out on some points, but I will cover them in the next episode. So the nuance between trauma and intuition overlapping. So sometimes your trauma response is activated because there is a real threat and a real problem. You may be triggered by somebody's behavior, and the behavior may also be inappropriate. You may feel fear around a boundary, and the boundary may still need to be set. So being activated doesn't mean that you are incorrect. It just means that you need to slow down enough to decide what that feeling means and interpret it. And without a grounded sense of spaciousness, that becomes confusing and destabilizing. So there's usually a mature middle in those situations. Remember, if it's black and white, there's usually a mature middle. So don't blindly obey every trigger. Don't dismiss every trigger. Get regulated, look at patterns, look at the truth, stay grounded, ask clear questions, watch yourself, your own behavior and other people's behavior over time, and notice what happens. Gather information. As you gather information from trial and error out here, you are helping yourself gather information, interpret data internally as well. So let's close it there. I think we got through everything we said we would, and I can't wait to see you next week.